need a sovereign wealth fund. So I don't think there can be much argument about
so
that.
Put simply, that's just saving.
It's just a savings, just like individuals save. But it's more compelling for countries such as Nigeria that relies for 85% or more of its revenue on a commodity.
A commodity.
A commodity that is traded globally and whose price fluctuates. Let's break it down. First of all, you have oil in the ground. Whoever put it there for posterity, for all Nigerians. Now, so the first point is, why should some of us consume all of it? And then for our children to then lack those resources. So first, the first argument is, if you are dependent on a commodity, you should save some of it so that future generations can benefit from it. That's the first point. But more importantly, because you depend for your income on a commodity whose price fluctuates, and sometimes fluctuates radically. We saw oil prices fall to below $40 per barrel in December 2008, once we had a global recession. We saw it rise to $120 per barrel in April 2011. That gives you the behavior of commodity prices, not just oil, any commodity, because that's the structure of commodity markets. So you have those fluctuations. Does it make sense to find a means as an economic mechanism of stabilizing those incomes so that you average it out at, say, $60 per barrel? That's the second point. And I'm trying to keep this untechnical. The third point is, if you have all of this commodity income that you are generating, should you have a mechanism for ensuring, especially in a country like Nigeria where you spend 75% of your income on recurrent expenditure, salaries, wages, overheads, and corruption? Does it make sense to find a mechanism where you ensure that some proportion of those income must go to building infrastructure? It certainly does. Those are the arguments for the sovereign wealth fund. There's a fourth argument, which is that when you have savings, Nigerians saw a huge inflow of foreign direct investment between 2003 2006. Why? Because when you have significant sovereign savings, you send a message to the world about the strength of your economy.
Is that what FDI investors
will look to? How secure is this country's macroeconomic situation? How stable is it likely to be? And perhaps one of the most important attractions will be, okay, see, this economy is robust. They have savings, 40 billion, 50 billion, 100 billion. Why do the world fear China? Because it has these huge war chests of sovereign savings. So, all of those are the factors around why you need a sovereign wealth fund. And I don't think that even the governors will dispute that argument. I think the argument is over different things, and I'll try to present their own point of view as I understand it.
Okay.
So you have these compelling arguments, in my view, for why countries, especially countries dependent on commodity prices, must have a sovereign wealth fund. And it is because of that. If you look at the structure of the fund that Nigeria has created by the law, it then has, you see, you learn from the experiences of others. So in designing the Nigerian sovereign wealth fund, some countries have designed their own fund for infrastructure, just like I said. Some have designed it for stabilization, which is to smoothing revenues. Some have designed it for future generations, which is just to save for their future generations. Nigeria has designed a fund that has those three components. So you have three funds in effect within the structure of the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund. One for futures generations. A second fund for stabilization. That's the one that you keep, so that when oil prices go below that your benchmark, you release from the fund to smoothen the revenue flow, so that the economy can proceed without shocks, which is what the Nigerian economy is particularly vulnerable to. We're particularly vulnerable to oil price shocks. When the oil price goes down, as it did in December 2008, we devalue our currency from 117
so when we have that, we wouldn't be doing that. We just go back.
We'll just release.
Like the shock absorber.
Exactly. That's exactly what the Sovereign Wealth Fund does. So, and then we have the Future Generations, the Stabilization, and the Infrastructure Fund, which then ensures that money goes towards infrastructure because of the structure of infrastructure finance, which requires large, long-term funding. So if you want to build refineries, if you want to build roads, if you want to build airports, if you want to build bridges, you clear that fund so that it can be the channel through which the financial system channels funds to infrastructure. And so that's the structure of the fund. Now, what are we arguing about in Nigeria? I happen to believe, and I totally support the existence of a sovereign wealth fund, but I happen to believe also that the issues that the states are concerned with are not also worthless points. We've seen the economic argument, which is what I've just presented, and I think it's compelling. But there's also the federalism argument or the constitutional argument, or both. There's a constitution that prescribes a mechanism by which the funds will be dispersed among the federating units in Nigeria. The Nigerian federal government already takes 52% and more through other mechanisms of funds disbursed through that consolidated revenue fund. The states and the local governments, 36 plus 774, take 40-something%. Now, in effect, the governors, and remember, they're already bitter that by the actions of the federal government, their revenue profile has been drastically depleted through the minimum wage issue. So they are confronted again by another depletion of their revenue base through the sovereign wealth. Because the effect, what the sovereign wealth fund will then do is, once you fix your oil price benchmark and say, this year, the oil price we are budgeting on is $70 per barrel. All revenues over that, just like we used to do with the illegal excess crude account, will now go to the Sovereign Wealth Fund Authority as cushion. So the day the thing collapses, they will now release some for stabilization. So in effect, it's a deduction in your possible revenue. You remember, under the current system, even if you pass it to the excess crude account, one day the governors will agitate, and then the money will be released because it had no legal backing. So this would have provided a legal backing that would allow that mechanism to work in a seamless manner.
Some Nigerians will be getting a fair understanding of all of this now that you've been able to break it down to the basics. But again, the fear, you in the course of your analysis, you mentioned something that loads and loads of people just don't like. You talk about corruption. And if you say in other climes they have stuff like this, a wealth fund where they can really rush back just in case there's kind of emergency in the economy, what happens when we really how safe can this fund be, and how well can it be? Because if you say we should liken it to the savings maybe that I keep, if I'm not a man who has financial discipline, that means when there's an emergency in my home, then I wouldn't have anything to fall back on.
Or when governments change.
Well, that is why you see we have to deal with corruption. Everything that we talk about in Nigeria entails having to confront the issue of corruption. And I think beyond the issue of corruption, this issue of the political economy of the Nigerian state, who does it take care of? Does it take care of the rich? Does it take care of the powerful? Or does it take care of, in an equitable manner, does the economy take care of everybody? So that's a different issue. But certainly, if I have a corrupt system, I will actually prefer to have a mechanism that reduces the funding available to those corrupt people at every point in time and defines how much of it they can spend corruptly. which means, I mean, if there's no sovereign wealth fund, there will still be corruption, right? And if there's sovereign wealth fund, there will be corruption. So I would rather reduce the amount of money available today to be spent corruptly, and at least hope that by creating a mechanism that forces some savings, that I can exclude some portion of funds from today's corruption, and hope that by tomorrow we may have found a solution to corruption. In any event, that's the advantage of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Or more accurately, what we actually have is a Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority Act.
Okay, that's to manage it or what?
Yes, that's the law.
Okay.
The law is the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority Act.
But in terms of
creates that Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority. So it's an independent.
So it gives it the legal backing other than the excess crude account.
Exactly.
That wasn't
It's an
backed by anything.
independent legal institution. It at least contains some institutional mechanisms.
How will it help? Yeah.
To insulate it with trustees, with